Hey, how's it going? I'm just going to be running through some of the basics of the Krunker map editor just to kind of make things a little bit easier for you because the documentation is a little bit lacking at the moment. So follow along as best you can. I should probably introduce myself. My name's Hoax. You may or may not have played some of my maps in the custom servers. If you have, then yeah, cool. If you haven't, then, and you are interested in actually making maps, then this is probably going to be quite helpful for you. All right, first things first, let's go ahead and actually find out how we actually get into the map editor itself. It's pretty straightforward. If you guys jump over to Krunker and let me just refresh it so I don't DC. Inside of the Krunker menu, it's pretty straightforward. Up under the custom maps, up at the top right hand corner over here, we have a custom map. So if we go ahead and click on that, and then we come over to map editor and we click on that. That's going to load a offline kind of window that basically, well, it's the map editor. Pretty straightforward. All right, so let's have a look at some of the basic kind of, I guess, functionality. Let's just figure out how to move around the map first before we actually kind of get carried away and start making things, because it can be pretty disorientating if you've actually never used a 3D application before. I'm pretty adept at it. I've been doing it for well over a decade now, using 3D applications, so this is kind of second nature to me. But it will be kind of, it will definitely be disorientating when you first use it to begin with, but just bear with it. You will get used to it. You'll get used to the kind of spatial dynamics of it all, and it'll become second nature eventually. All right, so the basic movement keys for moving around inside of the editor are the following. To pan around and have a look at our scene, if you hold down the right mouse button, you can just look around on the spot to see actually what's going on. Now, just like in Krunker, the basic movement keys for moving forward, back, and left and right is the W, A, S, and D key. So if I press W, I'll move forward. If I press S, I'll move back. If I press A, I'll move to the left, and D, move to the right. Now you can use those keys just like inside of the actual game itself in conjunction with the right mouse button to move and look around the map as you're navigating everything that's going on. All right, so those are the basic movement keys. So let's go ahead now, and I'm just going to jump over to a brand new editor, and let's go and create a ground plane and a cube. Well, actually, let's just create a cube and have a look at actually manipulating the objects inside of the editor. Okay, actually, before I do that, let's just have a look at the UI. Real simple. We have kind of three areas where there are a bunch of buttons. We have the top right one, which is kind of the main create and configure area where you can go to create all the different objects you want, where you can configure the color, the type of texture that's used, the direction. And down the bottom left, we have some of the kind of basic selection and movement options, which we also have hotkeys for as well. And last but not least, down the bottom right, we have test map. Don't worry about hitting that just yet because there is no spawn point. It'll kind of not work. All right, let's go ahead and create our very first cube. So to create a cube, we just move up to the top right hand menu system up here, and we have create object. So there's three options. We've got map config, where you go to actually specify the name of your map, which actually let's go ahead and do now. So under map config, we've got name. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this test. All right, mod URL is where you go ahead and import a link to a FTP hosted or Dropbox hosted link to any kind of custom textures for weapons or environment textures as well. Real quick, we've got ambient light, which a skylight, light color, and fog distance. I'll dive into these a little bit more in depth later, but ambient light is overall light. Sky color is like the color of the sky. Light color is the color of the direct light hitting your scene. Think of it like the color of the sun. Fog light is pretty self-explanatory. Fog color is pretty self-explanatory. It is the color of your fog, and fog distance basically is just how thick it is, and how thicker it is closer to you. All right, so that's my map config. So I've just gone ahead and just named it test map. All right, now I'm going to come down to create object. Create object is where we go to create all of the basic primitives that are available inside of the editor. We've got the crate, which you're very familiar with in game. We've got the stack, which is that stack of bricks similar to the crate. We've got a barrel, yep. We've got the vehicle, which some of you may or may not have seen. I recommend not using this until you know how to kind of fix its hitbox or collision issues. We've got the ladder, we've got the cube, ramp, we've got a plane, which is just a flat plane. We've got a billboard, which functionality doesn't quite work at the moment. We've got score zone, which is a zone for all the hardcore parkour kids who like being monkeys and stuff. Death zone, which is if anyone moves into that zone, they die. Spawn point, it's where they spawn. And camera position is that little rotating camera at the very, very start of Krunker when you enter a map. It just kind of spins around in the spot. Let's go ahead first and create ourselves a cube. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cube. All right, so smack bang center in what we call our world space. So this is world space, and this little kind of grid thing here is actually called the grid. This is the center of our infinite world that goes off into infinity. But this is where every single object that you create will be positioned when you first bring it into your map. All right, so I'm just going to throw this out here as well, guys. Don't ever bother using a plane. Just forget they exist at the moment. They're kind of useless. Always use a cube for your ground plane. It's that simple. The textures don't really tile with the plane, whereas they do with the cube. And the cube just gives you a lot more kind of functionality. All right, so we've got our cube, and we want to move it around our scene. It's pretty straightforward. We have these little arrows here. So to actually access the movement key, we come down, well, once the object is selected, we come down to these three little buttons down in the bottom left-hand corner. We've got translate, rotate, and scale. If I go ahead and click on translate, you can see we've got these little green manipulation handles or gizmos, whatever the hell you want to call them. And you'll also notice they are color coded. We've got the Y, the X, and the Z axes. Grabbing one of those arrows, holding down your left mouse button, and just moving that object around enables you to move it on that axis. Basically, it's stuck moving in that direction that the arrow is pointing. So that's up and down. We've got the red one, which is left and right, and we've got the blue, which is forward and back. So that's how you go ahead and move your objects around the scene. Now, 1 on your keyboard is the shortcut to access the translate tool. Okay, next option to move our objects is rotate. And I'm going to be honest with you, please just don't ever use rotate in Krunker right now. It is completely broken. It does not, it just doesn't work. Okay, what happens is that when you rotate an object, the engine doesn't update where the collision box is, and as a result, inside of your map, you're going to end up with all these invisible blocks and blocks that you can walk through. So just please do not ever use rotation tool. Okay. So I'm going to have a quick look at it real quick just to kind of explain, because there are ways you can use it in your map, but until you're confident in actually creating maps and knowing the limitations and the limits of rotate, I recommend avoiding its use completely. So I'm just going to jump back to the translate tool real quick. So I'm pressing that, or 1 on my keyboard. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because there is actually a couple of other handles that I forgot to show you guys, and I'm just going to show you in case you accidentally click on them and wonder what the hell just happened. So if I go ahead and select my cube again, you can see there are these little kind of planes in here, right? If I go ahead and grab it, I can move it round and around on that axis. So if I grab the light blue one, you can see it's forward and back. If I grab the pink one, it's on the side like that. And last but not least, there's this little one in the middle, a little kind of diamond. That just basically moves it based on the direction. It moves it based on where your camera is at the moment. So it's kind of moving it flat, but it's keeping it in alignment with the actual camera itself. So I'll be honest with you, don't ever bother using those ones until you're kind of familiar with or comfortable with using these handles here. All right, so I'm going to jump back over to the rotate tool. So instead of clicking this button, I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard. And you can see we've got these little round manipulation handles. If I go ahead and grab the gold one around here, that's going to rotate the object based on the position of the camera. So just don't ever use that one because, well, it's rotate, and don't ever use rotate. We've got the green, the blue, which once again rotates it on that angle. We've got the red, rotates it on that, and we've got the green, which rotates it on the y-axis, like so. Okay, once again, please don't use the rotate ever, unless you know what you're doing. I guarantee you're gonna, if you do think that it's okay to use it, and you spend like 5, 6, 7 hours, hell, even a couple of months on a map, and you're wondering why you've got all these invisible blocks, it's because you didn't listen to me and you touched the goddamn rotate tool. So just forget that it exists. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that cube because I actually have rotated it and I don't want any unforeseen issues to come along. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create another cube. Boom, done. All right. So last but not least, we have scale. So down the bottom left-hand corner, see we've got scale. I'm not going to click on it though. You can if you want. I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard as the shortcut to access the scale tool. I recommend getting used to the shortcuts because it is definitely going to speed up your workflow when creating your maps. All right. So I'm grabbing the cube. Once again, you're seeing the same theme going on. You can see we've got the green, the blue, and the red. Now, instead of rotating, this is what you should always do. You should scale the cube into the new direction you want it to be. All right, pretty straightforward. So if I go ahead and grab this green scale handle now, you can see it's changed. Instead of an arrow, it is now a cube. If I grab that and I left click, hold down my left mouse button and drag it, you can see that the object is scaling up. And the scale will always scale from the bottom of the object up, all right, or down, like so. Now if I go ahead and grab the red one, you can see it scales along that axis. And the blue one as well, it scales along like so. All right, so let's go ahead now and just create our very first basic simple map. We're going to create 2 walls and we're going to go ahead and create a spawn point and a ground plane. All right, now when I say ground plane, once again, don't use plane, just use a cube. All right, so I'm going to grab this cube we just created and I'm going to grab press 3 on my keyboard to access the scale option, left click, hold down that manipulation handle and drag it all the way down. And now we have a flat cube and I'm also going to grab the other ones and I'm going to scale them out like that. Now there is one little button just here, right, that'll scale it all uniformly. So if I grab that and scale, well, okay, it's kind of broken. Forget that it exists. Anyway, let's go ahead and create that. So I'm just scaling it out like so. All right, so we've got our basic ground plane. Let's go ahead and create a wall. So instead of actually going up and creating a new cube, I'm actually just going to go ahead and borrow this cube that we're, well, not borrow, but I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So down the bottom left-hand corner, now I'm skipping over world and local for now, okay? I'm not going to get into those. But we've got the next 2 buttons across, which is delete object and duplicate object. Pretty self-explanatory what they do. Delete's going to get rid of it, and duplicate is going to create a copy of it. And it's going to create a copy of it exactly in the same position it currently is, which means if you accidentally go ahead and hit duplicate and don't actually move that object and forget that you actually hit duplicate, you're going to have an object sitting on top of one another, and it's going to cause all sorts of weird artifacting, which actually kind of leads me to another point. Never, ever overlap the faces of any of your objects, right? If you've got 2 faces in a game engine that are overlapping one another, it basically freaks out. The game engine doesn't know which face it should display or render, and as a result, you get all this flickering. So you may have noticed in some of the custom maps that you run around and you can just see some of the construction and it's just flickering horribly. It's quite distracting. That's because they've actually got overlapping faces, okay? So try and avoid that as much as you possibly can. All right, coming down to the duplicate button now. Now, I can't remember if I duplicated it, so I'm just going to move it up. No, I didn't duplicate it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit duplicate now. Scale this up, move this bad boy up by pressing 1 on my keyboard and moving him up. Now, instead of rotating him, I'm going to scale it into a wall. So I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard to access the scale tool, scale it across, scale it up. Press 1, and I'm going to come down and just make sure that it is sitting flush on the actual ground itself. So right here you can see I've got a little bit of an overlapping face just there, so I'm just going to grab this and move it up until it's nice and flush along that edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and push it out. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and duplicate that because I want one more wall off to the side here, so I'm going to press duplicate. I'm going to move this bad boy out. Now, instead of actually scaling them manually, we do have another option to manually input the values that we actually want the object to scale to. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So with that cube selected, we're going to call it a wall selected, I'm going to come over to the right-hand side here. I'm going to come down to the little size option there. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to open up a little sub-menu, and this is the size values that it's currently scaled to. So currently it's 2 on the x-axis, which is this little kind of thin part here, so that's about 2 units wide. We've got 26y, which means it's 26 units high, and we've got 102 units in the z-axis, which is 102 here. So I want the wall to be over on this side over here, so all I have to do is swap the 2 and the 102 around. So if I do that now, go 102, come down to 2, press W, you can see now it's moved into the new position, and all I have to do is make sure that it is nice and flush and that we don't have any overlapping walls, which I actually currently do here. So I'm just going to scale that up just to make it a little bit more flush, and boom, there we go. Okay, so we've kind of got the first part of our map done. What we do need to do now though is actually go ahead and create our first spawn. So I'm going to come up to spawn point, press spawn. There's this little dude here who's going to be created, right? That's a spawn point. Just make sure that he's not sitting in the ground like this. Make sure that, if anything, he's just one little tiny bit above the ground so that when people spawn in, they don't fall through. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and test that map by pressing the test button, obviously. Give it a second. Now this is an offline version. Oh, it's not working. It's going straight into the Krunker. No, there we go. It has worked. Okay, cool. Alright, so we've got our very first map inside of Krunker. We've got the 2 walls, the ground plane, the spawn point, and our world. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.